If you got the snapshots this week online, you noticed with this series we're beginning for the season of Lent, a place at the table. There was an embedded link that you could go to and read an article by a friend of mine, Dr. Tom Pace, the pastor at St. Luke United Methodist Church in Houston. Now, I've got 50 copies of that out there. If you want to see it when you leave, please pick one up. It's double-sided. The reason the article I think is so wonderful by Tom is that he indicates very clearly that we may be a differing group of people with differing opinions, but that's a policy issue. In other words, we may disagree on what policies ought to happen, but when we really have a serious conversation, we're united in a common sense of purpose. And I would suggest to you that in our current climate politically in our world, where behaviors that seem to be deplorable by one particular perspective are baptized once in power by another perspective and vice versa, we need to hear a word about coming together for something that's bigger than our perspectives. And I think the table of Holy Communion is probably the best place for us to be reminded, for truly it is a place where all are welcome. Or as easily stated by the children, everybody is welcome here. You know, we see signs all over the place that remind us of those things, but we can take for granted as a people of faith, people that are in the church, we assume everybody knows the message, everybody knows what's going on. I'm sure that none of you had to explain to anyone what the dirt on your forehead was Wednesday night. Some people don't even know what Lent is. We use lofty language like eschatology and salvation, and sometimes the simplicity of God's love can be lost. And so I simply want to share with you today a story that I picked up from Richard Gribble, which illustrates for me the importance of us knowing the simplicity of the faith and knowing that everybody is welcome here. A new pastor had just graduated from seminary. He was very well prepared for his first Easter, he thought. He had all the major, interesting theology. It was his first Sunday at Maple Community Church, and David was putting his final touches on his sermon, and he told his wife that he was going to preach a sermon on Easter Sunday that was based on the theology of Paul Tillich, which basically would talk about the resurrection as a symbol of estrangement from our authentic self, and that basically God made possible a new being in the resurrection, and if people would accept this truth, their unauthentic existence would end and new life would begin. David didn't notice that his wife was doing this the whole time. Early that Saturday evening before Easter, David drove to the church for the youth rehearsal for sunrise service. Kind of familiar. Our youth do sunrise service here as well. After taking one of the youth home and being new to the community and not in that part of town before, he got a bit confused and he ran out of gas. He was overcome with anxiety. It's now 10 o'clock on Holy Saturday evening. He's lost and he's out of gas. And he needs to be at the church at 6 o'clock, only 6 hours away. He gets out of the car and he begins to walk. 10 minutes later, he saw some bright lights up ahead of him, and as he walked closer, he could see the lights came from a bar, and the neon sign read, "The Boondocks." I know, okay, see, I heard at the early service there's a bar in Amarillo named The Boondocks. So I'll be going back through the tape and seeing who smiled and laughed at that to know that, huh? And everyone in that community, including David, knew that this was one of the seediest taverns in town. As he walked up to the front door, he saw parked out front a group of big motorcycles, and that made him a little bit nervous. Entering the bar, he didn't see anybody he recognized. A fact that was both good and bad. He wondered, what would church members think of me if they knew the night before the resurrection Sunday I was at the Boondocks? David approached the bar intending to ask for a ride to town, but he found himself ordering a Coke. And he noticed a billiards table behind him, and he soon engaged in a game with the locals. David played pool since he was 6 years old, and he was very good at it. But this night, he was fantastic. He ran the table twice after the break, and this action was noticed by Turk. Turk was a short but powerful biker. He was the patriarch of the bar, and he slipped off his leather jacket and challenged David to a game. And after 3 consecutive wins, Turk conceded defeat. He bought David another Coke at the bar and then announced to everybody henceforth, folks, this fella's going to be known as the Shark. And then he asked that inevitable question. Turk looked at David and said, "Hey, Shark, what do you do?" David was uncertain whether he should tell the truth or lie, but he summoned the courage. He said, I'm a minister in town at the Maple Community Street Church. Everybody sort of shocked and began mumbling about themselves, and then Turk bellowed, "Y'all be quiet." In the silence, one of the persons that was there began to tell their story of brokenness and hurt. And one by one they shared until it was Turk's turn, and he said, Shark, I've never been to church. You see, my mother was never married, so people told her she was not good enough for any church. I'd never been to Sunday school either. What I know about the Bible comes from television. I don't really even know what Easter is all about. Everybody sort of turned their eyes on David, who realized that Turk had given him the perfect invitation and he needed to respond. So David began to tell everyone assembled about Jesus. He told about his birth and his ministry. He told them that those who were religious and powerful had little time or energy for Jesus, who reached out in a special way to those who were despised of society at large. He did many wonderful things, cured many diseases, forgave sins, and demonstrated love in every word and action of his life. After 3 years of active work, Jesus, who mostly stayed in the northern section of the nation, ventured to the south, to the capital city of Jerusalem. He entered the city one Sunday morning. A great group of people were hailing him and praising him, saying, "Hosanna." They laid palm branches down on the ground before him. But later that same week, those who were his enemies plotted against him. On Thursday evening, he was arrested and he was tried. Everyone at the bar seemed to be raptured with attention at the story. David continued, the next day, Jesus was led to a crucifixion wearing a crown of thorns, and all his best friends that had abandoned him, save a couple of them who watched all the horrible events unfold. People mocked him by saying, "All hail the King of the Jews." And because Jesus was tortured so severely, he died on the cross after about 3 hours. His loyal friends took him down and laid him in a tomb. Upon hearing the story, several of those in the bar were moved emotionally. David then told everybody in the bar that on Sunday morning, Jesus' friends went to the tomb to visit, but they met 2 angels who told them that Jesus was no longer there. He had risen and he was alive. And that later that day, Jesus appeared to his friends, the same ones who had abandoned him just a few days earlier. Turk and the others were somewhat impressed, but somewhat perplexed. Turk said, "That's a crazy story, Shark." David responded, "It's a crazy world, but our God can turn losers into winners. He's shown that many times over, and what most believe as weaknesses in a person maybe are truly strengths. He demonstrated that those despised by society might be your best friends. And by raising his son from death, God destroyed death forever." When all was said and done, David then told Turk about his car problem. And quickly, the rugged biker got some gas for David, gave him directions, and sent him on his way. When David arrived home, his wife, who was obviously concerned about him, said he needed to get to bed. He needed to get some rest. It's a big day. It's your first Easter at the Maple Community Street Church. But David said, "I need to rewrite my sermon." The next day, it's Easter morning at church, and David did not talk about a new being or Tillich's theology or estrangement from authentic selfhood. He simply told the story of how God raised Jesus from the dead. In the process, gave all people new life and new hope. People in the congregation thought the sermon was good, but what really got their attention was the strange group of visitors who appeared in church seated toward the front that day. All of them knew something was up as they came to church and saw a row of Harley Davidsons parked out front. One of the ushers in coat and tie nervously approached one of the gentlemen and said somewhat uncomfortably, "Are you all new here?" And Turk said, "Yeah, we're friends with the shark." Who are your friends? Who are the people that don't have what you have this morning? Who are the people who are still walking in darkness because no one's shown them a kind word or have ushered them to this place? Who are people who have no idea there's a God who loves them so much that they'll prepare a place at the table for them? I know the liturgy and the Great Thanksgiving. It's there. 32 years, I've read it many times. But there's a song by Zach Williams that says it best. It's "Come to the Table." The words are going to be in your bulletin. A day I want to think about for you and me. If God prepares the feast for all nations and all people, how are you and I doing inviting people to the table and sharing the love of Christ? Because everybody is welcome at the table.